Blackwood Manor loomed, a specter against the stormy sky. Ivy, like grasping claws, choked the stone walls. Windows, vacant eyes stared out blindly. Eleanor Vance shivered, pulling her coat tighter. The wind howled through the trees, an unearthly moan. She paused, a wave of unease washing over her. This place, it felt wrong. Just an old house, she murmured, forcing a brave smile. Nothing to be afraid of. But her words lacked conviction. The house seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, a dark, malevolent energy. As she stepped closer, the shadows seemed to deepen, swallowing the light. Blackwood Manor awaited her, its secrets whispering on the wind. Eleanor never expected to inherit a house. She had always lived a modest life, never imagining that one day she would own property, let alone something so grand, let alone a house like this. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, with its towering spires and Gothic architecture. But her great-aunt, a woman she'd never met, had left her Blackwood Manor in her will. The name itself sent shivers down her spine, conjuring images of dark hallways and hidden rooms. "It's a grand old place," the lawyer had said, his voice echoing in his dusty office. His tone was both reverent and foreboding, as if he knew more than he was letting on. "Though it's been empty for years." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history and forgotten memories. He'd handed her a brass key, cold and heavy in her hand. It felt like a relic from another time, a tangible link to a past she knew nothing about. Now, standing before the imposing structure, Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. The house seemed to watch her, its windows like eyes peering into her soul. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind. There are stories, of course, rumors, but just local superstition. His dismissive tone did little to ease her growing unease. Superstition or not, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to her. It was as if the very air around the manor was thick with secrets and shadows. She had inherited more than just a house. She had inherited its secrets, its darkness. The weight of it pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe, and she had a feeling they were about to become all too real. The manor seemed to pulse with a life of its own, whispering promises of revelations and horrors yet to come. The old housekeeper, Mrs. Hughes, showed her around the mansion, her steps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Her voice, thin and reedy, echoed in the cavernous rooms, adding to the eerie atmosphere that seemed to cling to every corner. Dust motes danced in the pale slivers of light that pierced the gloom, creating an almost magical yet unsettling scene. "Such a shame," Mrs. Hughes sighed, running a gnarled hand over a cobweb-laden table, her eyes reflecting years of neglect and sorrow. "Such a beautiful house. Wasted," she murmured, her voice tinged with regret and a hint of nostalgia for better days. Her eyes darted nervously towards the shadows that clung to the corners, as if expecting something to emerge from the darkness. That night, alone in the vast, echoing house, Eleanor lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of the day's eerie tour. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers, creating a symphony of unsettling noises. And then, she heard it, a sound that sent chills down her spine. A whisper, faint and indistinct, somewhere in the darkness, barely audible, but unmistakably there. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears as she strained to listen. She strained to listen, but the sound was gone, leaving only the oppressive silence. "Just the wind," she told herself, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "Just the old house settling," she repeated, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. But deep down, a seed of fear had been planted, growing with each passing moment in the eerie silence. The next day, Eleanor explored the village, desperate for human contact, for reassurance. She found it in the local pub, a cozy haven from the oppressive atmosphere of the manor. "Blackwood Manor," the old man said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Ah, it's a sad tale, that is." He took a long drag from his pipe, his eyes distant. He told her of the family who had lived there generations ago, of their sudden violent end. "A murder-suicide," they whispered in the village. "Driven to madness by the house itself," some said. Eleanor listened, captivated and horrified. The old man's words painted a picture of despair and madness, of a darkness that permeated the very walls of Blackwood Manor. A darkness that she now realized was closing in on her too. Back at the manor, the shadows seemed deeper, the silence more profound. Eleanor wandered through the empty rooms, each one a testament to a forgotten past. In the master bedroom, she paused before a cheval mirror. Its silvered surface was tarnished, reflecting her image back as a distorted specter. She turned away, but something made her look back. This time she wasn't alone in the reflection. Standing behind her, a hazy figure, tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the gloom. Eleanor whirled around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. Panic surged through her. Was she imagining things, or was the darkness of Blackwood Manor finally claiming her sanity, just as it had claimed the family before her? The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, scratching at the edges of her sanity. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares filled with shadowy figures and suffocating darkness. She tried to leave, to escape the suffocating grip of Blackwood Manor, but each time she reached the front door, an invisible force seemed to hold her back. Panic turned to terror. She was trapped. The house was alive. It fed on her fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. Eleanor was no longer just a visitor, she was a prisoner, and Blackwood Manor was her jailer. One night, driven to the edge, Eleanor found herself wandering through the dark corridors of Blackwood Manor. She stumbled upon a hidden room in the attic, a place she had never seen before. Dust-covered furniture filled the space, and in the center, a large oak desk stood ominously, as if guarding its secrets. Curiosity got the better of her, and she opened the diary that lay on the desk, its pages brittle with age and neglect. The words that greeted her were written in a spidery hand, filled with a desperate longing and a chilling fear. Each sentence seemed to echo with the voice of the past. It was the diary of the woman who had died in this very house, a woman whose presence still lingered in the shadows. As Eleanor read, the truth of Blackwood Manor unfolded before her, revealing secrets long buried and stories untold. It was not the house that was haunted, but the people within it. The walls seemed to whisper the tales of those who had lived and suffered there. The woman, driven mad by grief and isolation, had taken her own life, her despair seeping into the very fabric of the house. Her sorrow had become a part of the manor itself. Eleanor closed the diary, a cold realization washing over her. The weight of the woman's pain was almost tangible, pressing down on her. The whispers, the shadows, they weren't malevolent spirits, but echoes of the woman's pain, her loneliness, her terror. They were the remnants of a life cut short by sorrow. Blackwood Manor wasn't haunted by the dead, but by the living. The true ghosts were the memories and emotions that lingered, refusing to fade away. Understanding washed over Eleanor, calming the terror that had gripped her. The house wasn't her enemy, but a reflection of her own fears. She had allowed herself to be consumed by the darkness, just like the woman before her. With newfound resolve, she approached the front door. This time, there was no resistance. The door swung open, bathing her in warm sunlight. She stepped outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. As she turned back to look at the imposing structure, it no longer seemed menacing. It was just a house, old and neglected, but ultimately harmless. The haunting was over. She was free. Eleanor walked away from Blackwood Manor, her footsteps light, her heart filled with a strange sense of peace. She had faced her fears and emerged stronger, leaving the darkness behind. But as she rounded a bend in the road, she glanced back one last time. And in that fleeting moment, she saw it. A figure silhouetted in the attic window, watching her. It was her own reflection, distorted by the dusty glass. Or was it? A chill ran down her spine as she realized the terrifying truth. She hadn't escaped Blackwood Manor's grip at all. It had simply found a new home, within her.